Okay, so I'm one of the co-founders of the Nautilus Project. My wife is sitting at the front, and she's the other one. I studied marine biology at university. The environment and the marine environment has always been a very important thing with me in my life. Throughout my childhood, I was an avid snorkeler, and I spent a lot of time in the sea. On coming back to Gibraltar, I spent a lot of time looking at our marine environment, trying to analyze what the main problems that we have are. Bunkering and the increase of it and the activities of it is an obvious first answer. Pollution is another one. Plastic is a very big thing on our coastline, as it is globally. It's not something that we just have to isolate to Gibraltar. There wouldn't be any ream of things to look out for without climate change being in it, and of course climate change is something that will affect our coastline. The other one is air quality. Not all that well known, but the exchange between the ocean and the air is well understood by science, and so the poorer quality that there is in the atmosphere, the worse quality you can get underwater because of that gaseous exchange, and of course that affects the marine environment too. So of those, in my opinion, I think plastic is the greatest issue, and I hope to convince you of that this evening. So to start off with, plastic is formed, extracted from crude oil. It can be done through natural gases too. Essentially you get ethane. And you end up making these long man-made polymers. It's carbon and hydrogen. I don't really want to go into chemistry because not everyone's a chemist. But these structures are very hard to break down. Unlike natural products, things like wood, cardboard, that we can produce through paper, these long chains become very, very hard to break down. Now, there are some man-made efforts to do that. Biodegradable plastic is one of them. And what they do is they inject iron or they inject cobalt into the chains. And this allows these chains to be broken down into smaller parts. The bacteria, the whole part of biodegrade, from the environment, the bacteria degrade, break down these chains. The idea is that the chains start to break down initially with the biodegradable plastic, and then the bacteria can get to work. Unfortunately, the evidence on that doesn't seem to support that it works, and we might discuss that later in the discussion part. However, these molecules take a very long time to break down. Wood and cardboard can take 2 or 3 months to break down, whilst if you look at products like a fishing line, nylon fishing line, you're talking about 600 years. If you're looking at a plastic water bottle, it's 450 years. These are exponentially larger timescales. And some of the science that has come out actually suggests that this stuff doesn't disappear at all. That all that happens is that you halve the amount, and you halve the amount again, and you halve the amount again, and you always get closer to zero, but you never actually break up the product at all. Now, there are 2 lines of evidence, but at the moment, I think it's better to play safe. So how does this end up working out in the environment? Well, quite simply, these products are disposed of. A lot of the time it's single-use products. Plastic is a very durable material because it doesn't biodegrade, and so what happens is that the same property that makes it attractive to us is also the property that's causing the problem. It ends up in the marine environment over time breaking down into smaller and smaller bits. The macroplastics, the bottles, the plastic bags, the nylon rope, the nylon fishing line, all of these things are breaking down. And they break down into smaller and smaller constituent parts until eventually the biology starts to feed on it. Now, I'll let that sink in a second, because we've got problems with turtles feeding on plastic bags. We've got problems with fish eating microbeads from exfoliating creams, from whitening toothpaste, etc. And this stuff is entering the food chain. The problem with that is that in the process of making plastic, we inject all these other chemicals, and one of them is called bisphenol A. This is sometimes referred to as BPA, in the short abbreviation. But this is a carcinogen. This has health implications. And when we are top of the food chain, the bioaccumulation of these chemicals is working its way and it's concentrating at the top of the food web, and we are the top of the food web. So it's concentrating in us. For those of you that don't say, oh, but I don't eat fish, the irrigation systems on vegetables and fruits are made out of plastic piping. It's not something that we can easily escape. Bottled water, more often than not, our bottled water comes in plastic. And the ultimate irony for me in all of this is that when we go to supermarkets, sometimes we buy bottled water that is in a plastic bottle that is wrapped in a 6-pack in plastic, and then we take it to the counter, and because it's so heavy, we need to double bag it. So think of all the disposable plastic that is just waste, right? Because we're not using most of that plastic, we're not reusing any of it, and it's just getting discarded. Going to landfill, if it's not recycled, ends up in the this stuff doesn't biodegrade, as we said, but it ends up, these chemicals leach into our rivers, and our rivers end up flowing into the sea. So it all gets back to the same place anyway, and then back to us eventually. There are lots and lots of examples that I could give on this. Fishing line, only this summer we've had cases of spider crabs, a protected species in Gibraltar, entangled in nylon fishing line. I mean, how ironic is that? You're not allowed to fish it, but the fishing gear that we're using is killing the crab off because it's completely entangled. Plastic bags floating in the marine environment. I'm a snorkeler, I'm in the water all the time. There are pictures from the dolphin safari. If you check those out on Facebook, dolphins playing with plastic. Umpteen examples of this type of activity. And unlike climate change, this is something that is very easy to fix. I'm not standing here telling you that that if we switch to paper, the whole world is going to be better, because it's not. It's my initial idea of how to move forward. The whole idea of having this discussion is that perhaps there are members in this audience that have a better idea than I can ever come up with, and I'm open to listening to those ideas and seeing what you think might be a better way of taking this forward. But my initial idea is that at paper, if we were to switch back to paper, at least paper biodegrades. This is something that we can continue using, and even if we don't change too much of our lifestyle, even if we throw it into the marine environment, it's not going to kill animals, it's not going to intoxicate the food chain, and it won't come back to haunt us in the same way that plastic is. Finally, really, we spoke at the beginning, we mentioned how the emphasis on governments and on corporations to make these changes. And I think sometimes this is the problem that we have with things like climate change. We're also really kind of dependent on big government decisions in order to make this happen. And I think that's the wrong focus, especially with plastic, because it only takes a very small change, and very incremental change in our lives to say, look, I'm not going to select this product, I'm going to select the one next to it. It might cost me a bit more, but over time that price will come down, which will actually start to make a difference. And you will drive the change that will make the difference, and it will pass on a cleaner environment and a healthier environment, certainly in the case of the marine environment, onto our children. And I think that's very important. So I won't take any more of your time. Thank you for listening, and I'm very open and willing to take your questions.